I was gonna make a conscious effort to get like a some sort of bio put together for both of you, and I never did it. So, failure on my part.
Seth, I dig the new haircut, man.
Oh, you know what? The other one was ridiculous. My hair had gotten so out of control that when it was wet, it hung down like below my nose. It was absurd. So, thank you. You too.
Has anybody? Let me ask you. Has anybody ever told you look like Zachary Quinto?
Is that someone? I think you did. I think you've said it before.
So there you go. There's somebody.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
No, you dude, you look like that guy from the video game. What game is that? The
Fallout. Didn't you say Fallout?
Not Fallout. The guy with the
Half-Life?
glasses.
Half-Life.
Half-Life. You're like
Half-Life,
the dude from
yeah.
Half-Life. When you got your glasses on, just get you a machete or whatever it is he uses in that thing, and you'll go to town.
Okay, so we're sitting here. You guys are talking about. Okay, first of all, I'm talking tonight. This was a spontaneous SasWhat episode. For some reason, the way Mark and I operate is we record multiple episodes in a setting, and then I have episodes to kind of fall back on should we run into a week where I am out of ammo. And this week I'm out of ammo, and I realized I'm also out of episodes, so I called up the reserves. Brian Brown, Daryl Colyer of the NAWAC, who've been on the show. I know Daryl's been on at least once, possibly twice. Brian, you've been on a few times, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, a few times.
Yeah, and we wanted to talk. I wanted to have you guys on at some point to talk about the Watchtower Project monograph, but we have not got to that yet. So hopefully at some point we'll get around to that. But I wanted to have you guys on because it is the beginning of summer, and of course, every year the NAWAC, the North American Wood Ape Conservancy, goes into the area known as Area X in the Watchtower Mountains, and you stake it out. You're in there from basically what month do we typically go in? Can we even say that?
It varies.
Okay.
It's been different every year.
Okay.
And we do that for a reason. I mean, we've been as early as April, May. This year we start June.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it just varies. You know.
It's a wholly unique way of looking for what you refer to as wood apes, what a lot of people refer to as Bigfoot, commonly referred to as Bigfoot. To actually go in and stake out one single place where there has been repeated activity. It's not something a lot of groups would have the patience to do, and typically what most people want to do, and I think part of it has to do with kind of the fun of getting out there and doing their own version of ghost hunting, is to, you run out to where there's been a sighting, you investigate that sighting, and you might go out in the woods and do some tree knocking or whatever. But this group actually spends countless man-hours in the woods actively researching in an area that has had activity, and I think it's a fantastic idea and an amazing way to go about it. And you guys have had, obviously, a lot of results in this area. And I'm doing all this. I know a lot of our listeners are going to be aware of you guys, but we also have a lot of new listeners, a lot of people who are new to this subject in general, so we want to kind of introduce them to the subject of not the subject, but introduce them to the organization of the North American Wood Ape Conservancy. So,
I think that the approach that we take, the going out there and sort of staking out the area, and I'll let Daryl speak to that, because that was really, a strategy that was developed with his guidance. But I think that the ability to do that speaks to the commitment of the people in the organization.
Exactly.
I mean, we have so many members now, and they are willing to put themselves out there on their own dime. I mean, everyone takes personal time out and does this, and so we're able to field these groups of people 4 to 6 at a time on average over months. It's really, as you say, it's not something I've heard of before. I don't know that anyone else could do it just because of the manpower we have focused in this area. It isn't like, I'm sure the BFRO or some other groups have as many or more members, but they're spread out, they're diffuse. Our members are able to come and sort of bear down on this area. Plus, of course, we're very fortunate to be in an area where we know there to be activity, and we have access to it. And those are just sort of two not well, perhaps unique combinations of things that the NAWAC has to their advantage.
Daryl, do you want to speak a little bit about the organization and how you got involved in the first place? And just a little bit, I mean, we want to make this brief because obviously a lot of people have heard some of this stuff, but talk a little bit about the early days of the organization and how it's evolved.
Well, yeah, I actually got involved in 2003. And man, it seems so long ago now, but that's when I got involved. I contacted Alton Higgins, and began a long-time friendship. And we both were members of I became a member of the BFRO with Alton, and then we both joined a regional organization called the Texas Bigfoot Research Center, which that was the genesis for this organization, the North American Wood-Ape Conservancy. And 2007, the Texas Bigfoot Research Center became a nonprofit organization. We changed the name to Conservancy, and it's the requirements for membership have gotten progressively more stringent through the years. Our ambitions as an organization have gotten higher. We've become much more dedicated and serious to actually solving the mystery, getting well beyond any semblance of a social club, which, in my opinion, the organization in its early years, that's really what it was. It was an organization dedicated to having monthly meetings and everybody going out to a restaurant, and then you'd go out somewhere in the woods and kind of run around and say, "Oh, this is cool. We're looking for Bigfoot," and and I just said to myself, "This is not how you do it. If you want to go find a primate that's hiding in the deep woods somewhere, you don't just go out to the local lake at the woods and just sort of run around the woods on an afternoon and then say you've been conducting Bigfoot research." And so, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, if you really truly want to find something like this, you're going to have to invest a lot of time, a lot of resources, a lot of money, and most people aren't willing to do that. They just don't. They don't want to. Who considers it fun to go hang out in 95-degree weather with a humidity of 95 degrees, where all the animals want to kill you or eat you or sting you or bite you, and then and then also you've got the possibility of a 7-foot-tall undiscovered primate that could be aggressive. We don't really know. That's out there as well. I mean, it's kind of one of those things. It's just. I mean, who wants to really truly do that? I think it's the number of people who really want to do that. I think it's few and far between.
Okay, so that brings up a good point, because I'm sitting here before we started recording and I'm listening to you guys talk about when you're going into X this year, and there is especially from Daryl, I can always sense this overriding excitement, like you almost cannot wait to get back in there. So, right, but like over time, because this has been going on for years now, does that ever wane? And if it does, what brings you back? Like, is there a point where you're like, you know what, I'm just not feeling it, or are you more like
let's put this in perspective. We're going into the woods to document an animal that is not supposed to exist, that is strong enough and large enough to crush the cabin in which you house your team and in which you all stay, and it's the stuff of legends. It's smarter than anything in North America. It's stronger, faster than anything in North America, and the rest of the world thinks it's a freaking joke. And you have seen it with your own eyes. You've smelled it. You've seen the tracks more times than you can count. How can anyone not be? I mean, that's the coolest thing on the planet to me. How can anybody not be excited about that? I mean, I don't care how many times you've seen them. I don't care how many times you smelled them. I mean, I just can't wait to get back out there and just, match wits with these things, because they're incredibly intelligent.
We don't, we live in the future, right? We live in the 21st century, and the attitude of most people is that everything good has been discovered. Everything is known, and just to sort of echo what Daryl was saying, how many of us get to go and do something that is really an adventure, that is really
absolutely
on the edge of some kind of discovery. And so, I have to drive. I drive like 14 hours to get there. I'm never excited to leave, right? Because there's a lot of work. I got to load up my truck. I got to drive for a day. It's
an 8-hour drive for me, Brian.
It's no fun getting there. But
yeah,
and then when you're there, as Daryl says, it's hot. There's freaking ticks everywhere. It's uncomfortable. There are many sort of downsides to being there, but the upside is you are participating in this grand adventure that could actually answer one of the greatest questions of our time.
Not get excited about that.
Yeah, it's almost impossible. And to have, again, I don't want to get like weird about this, but like to be so fortunate to have access to this area, to know that something is there, and to have this organization behind you of dozens of people who are willing to sacrifice as much, if not more than you are, to make this possible. It isn't a question of how do you get yourself to do it. It's like how can you not be there all the time?
All the time, yes. Yeah. It's the same sort of feeling I have when a person approaches me and talks to me about it for the first time, and they have maybe an open mind about it, but they just can't quite buy into it. And I have this grin on my face the whole time I'm talking to them, and it's not because I'm smug. It's just because I know they exist.
Yeah.
And they don't. And some of these people proceed as if they do know. Well, it can't exist. It doesn't exist. And it's like, oh my gosh, if you only knew,
Yeah.
It's just incredible. It's incredible. How can you not be excited about it?
Right. And you talked a little bit about the early days of the organization. This opens up a good opportunity to bring up one of the questions that was posted earlier by Bob Strain.
Bob.
He asked, you guys have probably heard of him.
Bob Strain? I don't know that guy.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Bob
Actually,
Strain.
Humorously enough, I'm curious to find out if he got his Minerva Monster copy yet, because I addressed it to Bobo Strain.
Perfect.
He wanted to. He said you could talk about other aspects of the organization, like the highway adoption. And I know when I first got into the group, or was trying to get into the group, that the highway adoption thing was something I read about and thought that was kind of a cool aspect. Can you talk a little bit about that, either of you, and how that plays into the overall goal?
Well, in Texas, we have the Adopt a Highway program. I think Texas began that program way back in the 80s. It's just where a group of people or an organization, makes a pledge to adopt a certain stretch of highway, 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, and then they sort of become the custodian of that part of the highway. They clean it up, they keep it clean, make sure the litter is picked up, and then you get a sign. The organization gets a sign put up there, and it says, "This stretch of Texas highway adopted by North American Wood Ape Conservancy," which means that North American Wood Ape Conservancy is the custodian of that stretch of highway, and they're responsible for cleaning it. So John Dollins, who lives down in the Houston area, approached the board of directors about the possibility of adopting a stretch of highway in the Sam Houston National Forest, where there's been a pretty rich history of reported sightings of wood apes. In fact, it's the Adopt a Highway is on Highway 1375, which runs across Lake Conroe, and there's been a number of sightings through there. So we said, yeah, it's a great idea. So John took the leadership on that, and got the highway dedicated to us, and so the North American Wood Ape Conservancy periodically goes down there. A group of us go down there, and we clean the highway. We pick up the trash, pick up the debris, and make sure that stretch of highway looks good. That's how it works. And that's part of our our greater mission. Which, Brian, I'll let you speak to that.
Well, I think that there's you'll need to refresh my memory what part of the mission that accomplishes. But I would say that,
I guess
education, right?
Or,
I mean, what I like about it, just from the standpoint of being the guy who thinks about how the group is presented, it's a
marketing.
great sort of promotional piece for the group, but also it goes to the point of the esprit de corps that exists in the group, and I mean I think it's great. I wish that I'm a little too far away to drive down there for the weekend and help them pick up trash, but I would if I could. So I just think it speaks to the cohesion of the group and our willingness to just do stuff other than the stuff that gets all the press and everyone talks about press that everyone talks about in Area X.
And to actually work. I mean, to get out there and actually do that, pick up trash is not something.
Daryl's comment earlier about the very social aspect of the group, and I think that there is a social kernel there. There's still a lot of fellowship that goes on.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But it's it's just a little differently focused at this point. Usually when we get together now, we're talking about what we're going to be doing in the future, what we have done in the past. We talk about, or we're doing something like this, where we're cleaning up the highway. There's a little more focus to what we do, and that isn't taking anything away from people who just want to get together and socialize. I mean, that's what people do. But I think that the purpose of it now is a little more focused on things like that, and I appreciate that. I like that part of the group.
Yeah, I mean, you can't help but have a special bond. And that's one of the reasons military and firefighters and police officers, they have that sort of bond. When you go through something that's highly stressful together, and you share that commonality with another individual or with a group of individuals, it does create a very, very tight bond. And we have that bond by virtue of what's gone on in Area X, because we've shared those experiences together, and it makes us very tight. And so yeah, there's definitely my best friends are in this organization. I didn't come into the organization for that. I didn't seek that out. It's just happened. It's been a byproduct of it.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Bob Strain. Bob Strain is, I've known Bob Strain a long time. I mean, I love that guy like a brother, and it's partly because of what we've done together in this group.
All right, Area X, we talked a little bit about it. I gave a super brief overview. I want you guys to talk a little bit about X for people who've never heard of Area X. Explain where it is, not necessarily how we ended up there, but what kind of activity we've had there, kind of the results of the amount of time that you've spent in there, some of the things you guys have seen and heard and cataloged.
Well, I mean, that actually covers a lot of time, because we haven't just been in there the last couple of years. We've been going in there since the turn of the century, so it started. It's actually gone to a crescendo. I mean, it started at a very low level, and through the years, it's just incrementally built up and continued to build up, and then we have these last 4 years where we've done these field studies, and which has become called the Ouachita Project. It's just culminated in what we now almost take for granted in there. We started out incrementally. We started out putting cameras out, and that's pretty much all we did. We did it twice a year. We'd put a bunch of camera traps in the area. We would leave the area, and then we'd go back 6 months later to check the cameras. Did that for 5 years. We initially went in there because we were called in there by the people that own the land, who had these experiences, these things throwing rocks at their cabin and pushing over trees and that sort of thing. So Alton Higgins was called in there and began an investigation. And I hooked up with Alton, and then we started the camera trap project. That went on for 5 years. Tens of thousands of dollars spent, countless hours spent in there, taking care of those cameras, and then. Brian joined the organization. We began to have strategic discussions about how we can up the intensity of what we're doing there. The discussion evolved into, just becoming more of a presence and going from this sort of passive presence, which was the camera trap project, into a more aggressive or active sort of presence, which is what we now have, which involves putting actual boots on the ground for 4 months, three to 4 months every year.
The type of activity that we've experienced there has escalated, obviously, in quantity since we've been spending more time there. But even going way back, traditionally, wood knock sounds, rock throws, vocalizations, cabin slapping, and it wasn't until the first year of our extended operation that we had a sighting there. So we had been going in for like 7 or 8 years at that point before any of our members had a sighting. And so and the reality is, at that point there would have been members in our group, and I've made this point either on this show or in others before, but wood knocking, we were suspicious of wood knocking. We weren't sure that apes did that. Rock throwing, we had not had sufficient evidence that was something that apes did. Basically, all the way down the list of things that we've had multiple experiences with now, including whether or not the apes were present, were things that we walked in skeptical of. And then through the fullness of time and the ability of our experiences, what that granted us, we've come to accept many of these things as true. So we've had trees pushed down. We've had, really large rocks thrown.
Well, yeah,
not just like stones, but like
basketball.
Yeah, bowling ball.
Bigger than
rocks.
basketball, bowling ball. Yeah, absolutely.
Now that isn't frequently what happens, but it has happened. So it's the panoply of experience at this point. Much of it sort of traditional Bigfoot type activity, but the intensity and the frequency of it is what's really striking in Area X.
And that's what I was going to say. So you're talking about rock throwing, but you had what you guys referred to as the rain of rocks. There's sounds I've heard that you guys have recorded that almost are unbelievable to me. Like it's insane.
100% agree. In some of these things, had I not been there and experienced them, they would have left
be able to wrap your mind around.
Yeah. I've heard the rain of rocks. I know the guys who were there when that happened.
I was there.
Daryl was there. It is completely weird when you listen to it, and I don't know. I don't know how it was created. I don't know how they did it. We have recording of it, audio recording. It actually happened. There were 4 or 5 of our guys there when it happened.
3 of us. There were 3 of us. 3 of us there.
It's unusual, to say the least. And this is, a really critical point. I think there are some people in this field who would have experiences like ours. I don't know how many people have had the quantity of experience that we've had as a group, but there are definitely people in the field who have had experiences like ours. And they walk out of the forest with I think an attitude very often of they're confrontational about it. Like this has happened, this is true, and you need to believe me, and all that sort of thing. And I think what's a critical point about our group is we don't expect anyone to believe what we're saying just because we're saying it. We don't believe that we've had experiences that prove to the world that wood apes Bigfoot are real. That is sort of the whole reason we're there, and nothing that has happened up to this point is sufficient to do that. I don't expect anyone who's listened to my voice or read any of the things we put out there to walk away going, well, there they go. No, Bigfoot's real. That is not our point of view on this at all. I know how I feel about it. I know how Daryl feels about it, and I know what we're trying to do, but those are all sort of different things. So even though we have had the rain of rocks, we've had boulders thrown at us, we've had trees pushed over on us, we've seen them dozens of times now. We found tracks. We found what appears to me to be stations where they've been, like there's rocks, and underneath the rocks are broken nuts. I don't know how that happens if it's not a person or an ape. We found and have experienced all these things, but no one in this group will say, because of the things we've experienced, Bigfoot therefore is real, and all of you should believe it. That just isn't what we do.
So how do you prove it?
You collect some sort of irrefutable sample, some sort of
something that's independently verifiable.
Yeah, and that could be, I think we can get into the minutia of DNA evidence, and of course DNA would be great, but you need to have a sample size that's large enough to do ultimately, in the perfect world, you'd have a type specimen. You'd have a complete articulated body. But short of that, enough of a body so that multiple repeated DNA tests could be done on it, so that perhaps if you have some piece of musculature or skeleton that can be analyzed and proven and shown to be not of a known animal, some piece like that, that's what's going to prove that the animal is real.
That would still constitute.
Yeah, any piece of it that's big enough to identify like that is a type specimen.
That's right.
But in my opinion, and I believe the opinion of almost everyone in the group, certainly Daryl's opinion, a video isn't going to do it, a picture's not going to do it, another audio recording or another story isn't going to do it, another foot casting isn't going to do it, another piece of hair isn't going to do it. You're going to need a piece of meat, and a piece of meat that is identifiable and allows multiple testing by multiple parties.
And there are a lot of people who don't want to hear that. They become hostile when you even bring that up. They're just driven purely by emotion.
Yeah.
Because that's not how science works. Science, I mean, there was a paper that came out 2 years ago that questioned. It was written by a group of scientists. It questioned whether or not collection of specimens was even necessary anymore. Should we pursue alternative means? And that they even asserted in the paper that because of collection of type specimens, that certain populations of animals had been hurt, and there was just a gaggle of scientists that came out with a vociferous response to that said, you don't know what you're talking about. Type specimens must be collected, not only for purposes of cataloging a new species, but also for purposes of conservation, for learning about that particular species, for learning about its. You can learn so much from a specimen. Habitats, all sorts of things. Management can answer management questions, and it's very much still a 21st century phenomenon to collect type specimens. It's not something of the Victorian era. It goes on every day. It's just that so many of these people, they're just driven by emotion. And
I think there's a difference between collecting the 1/1,000,000th type specimen of a starling or a sparrow and collecting a specimen of a new and novel animal.
Yeah. Yes.
Of any kind, of any size, but particularly a brand new primate in North America, where primates are not known to have
that walks on two legs.
Right. I mean, it's a completely, unusual and novel kind of animal. It's an incredible statement to say that they're real. So you need incredible proof if you're trying to establish that they're real.
Okay, and that's what Dr. Krantz said. Dr. Krantz said that very thing, because this animal is so freaky, it's so unique, it's so different. You cannot get anything short of a specimen to prove it exists. If it were a subspecies of an existing, variant of an existing species of monkey or primate, it's different. Then you can get photographs, hairs. But this thing is so unique and so freaky, you're going to have a specimen. It's just the way it is. And I agree with him.
So there's this show that was on Destination America, I think it was last year. I think it was called Killing Bigfoot or Hunting Bigfoot. And of course you've got the monster guys that run around, the hillbilly dudes. I can't remember the name of the show, with drunken hillbillies. So I think typically when people say the words Bigfoot hunters, or obviously we don't use the word Bigfoot, but that is typically the image that people conjure up in your mind. But I've come to find out, obviously, that isn't how the NAWAC operates. You don't have 10 drunken hillbillies running around in Area X.
We have hillbillies, but none of them are running around drunk. I think that there's nothing to be done about stereotypes like that, and especially in the media. I mean, they're just selling commercial time, so they don't really care about that, and they're going to play to the lowest common denominator. I think that if you look at our guys, and I don't know anything about these guys. I don't know who they were. I don't know what they did because I didn't watch the show. But I mean, we've got trauma surgeons, we've got biologists, we've got law enforcement, we've got the walk of life out there, and we've even got marketing weasels like me, and so. I mean, I don't know what to do. I feel like those stereotypes are unfortunate, but I don't really know that there's anything we can do about them. I think that some people are gonna, they're gonna even the fact that many of our members have Southern accents, that's enough to fill in the blank on a lot of people's preconceptions about what the group is and what it's doing. And I just think that's unfortunate, and I think things like that show do nothing but take us backwards.
Well, I mean, that wasn't even necessarily the direction I wanted to go with that question. What I wanted to know is, what are we doing in the NAWAC that is not that? We're not just, obviously, you're not just wandering around the woods with guns slung.
No,
over your back.
And I think that The really critical thing that sets the NAWAC apart from everyone else is the fact that we have a place like X, and we know that they're there, and for whatever reason I can't explain, there is repeatable interaction that can take place with these animals. Most people, most organizations, I don't even know if there's an organization, they certainly aren't talking about it if there is, they don't have access to this. So the quote-unquote secret sauce for the NAWAC is we have a place like X, and we know they're there, and for whatever reason they don't leave, and they keep messing with us. So that is truly, I think, the sort of the physical on-the-ground thing that sets us apart from other people.
Right. When we're armed and we're in there, how do we approach that? Because, I mean, what I'm saying is I don't think we're just in there shooting at anything that moves in the bush. And I think
Certainly
a lot of
not.
people
No,
have
as a matter of
this
fact,
idea.
no. And I mean, Daryl can speak to this better than I can, but I think that we actually have rules and expectations around that, and we have had sort of rustly bushes and probable contact with wood apes via things like thermal imagery. But until you can make that positive identification, we don't take the shot. So that's a pretty high standard, and it doesn't leave us with a lot of shots to take. We've taken some, but we haven't taken as many as some people probably think. This idea that we're jumping around shooting at bushes is ridiculous.
Right.
Well, and you can't. Apparently we can't win that argument that the place is remote. People just, for whatever reason, they just don't want to buy into it. Everybody thinks they know how unremote this place is, having never been there. They all know it. And, of course, we're exaggerating and we're wrong. There aren't any people there. There just are not any people there. If they were, I would have caught them. We would have caught them. Humans just can't. That terrain is it's extremely difficult terrain. And if there's anybody in there running around without us knowing it, first of all, you hear vehicles coming. You can hear a vehicle coming from 2 miles off. You hear it. Yeah. Just because of the nature of the place. It's situated in mountains. There's no development, none, zero development. There's no sounds of urbanization. All you hear is wilderness. That's it. And if there's anything out of the ordinary, on occasion, on a morning, you might, depending on the density of the air and certain environmental conditions, you might hear a dump truck that's 3 or 4 or 5 miles down the forest road, hauling rocks, and you hear the rocks bumping, jostling around in the back of the truck. But it's just, the odds are just so low.
Anyone familiar with what we do there knows that we keep field journals, and it is an event. It is something that is noted with interest in the field journal if there's ever evidence of anyone else within several miles of us.
Absolutely.
Occasionally, a couple of times a year, you might hear some ATVs or something like that, and that's always something like, oh my gosh, you can hear. I mean, there's people.
We go investigate. We go to make contact with them.
We want to see who they are. We want to know if they're
because
camping
we're on
in the
private
area.
land. We're on private land, so there shouldn't be anyone there.
If there are people who are not in the organization, who are nearby, because there's cabins in the area. It's sort of a multifamily situation there. Most of the time, almost all the time, nobody is in there with us. But on the rare occasion someone is. Those are times that we're not operating. We're not attempting to collect a specimen in that case.
We stand down.
Those are quote unquote civilians. Those are people who are not part of this. They didn't sign up for any of this stuff, so we don't operate in those conditions. So this idea that a bunch of drunken rednecks are shooting at bushes and stuff like that, it is as Daryl says, it's an argument we can't win. It's a stereotype that exists that we cannot defeat, and it's just part and parcel with doing what we're doing.
We actually have a rule. We have a rules of engagement, and it's very stringent. We have protocols that dictate how we conduct ourselves, and when it comes to firearms, it's very strict. And we've tried to determine every contingency that we could possibly determine. If there's anybody at all, just like Brian said, if there's anybody at all that's not connected to the organization, and we have detected them within the area, we stand down immediately. All targets are to be identified. You can't take the shot just at something that big, brown and hairy that just darts between two trees, and you think it might have been a wood ape or whatever, but you just can't. You can't properly. It could have been a bear. or what, you can't take that shot. You can't.
We've had guys with the reticule on hairy shapes. You know, we've had guys, and looking back on it, there's absolutely a strong probability that what they had cited and what they had targeted was an ape. But because they never had a clear enough visual of the animal, they did not take it. They did not take the shot. That, I mean, we have more instances of that than we have, or like Daryl said, something that happened so quickly you couldn't possibly respond to it even if you wanted to. We have more instances of that, I think, than have actually taken shots at identified animals.
I think we've actually taken 4 shots over the 4-year period, and that's during 48,000 hours of time on site. 4 shots, and I took one of them.
Yep.
And you know, so I mean, that when you talk about that, when you put in perspective how much time we've actually spent on site, and that we've actually only shot 4 times. That's not very many times at these animals. Now I've shot, I shot at a tree stump because I saw a wood ape one time, and I'm very convinced that's what it was. It looked like a tree stump when I saw it. So, I took a shot at a tree stump. The next time I saw a tree stump that I thought might have been an ape, it could have been an ape, I shot it, and it turned out to be a tree stump.
Bob Strain has that story, and anyone who listened to the old Bigfoot show has heard the story, but where he poked his head into a bush, long story short, and saw some logs laying there, and then the next day we investigated this area and the logs were gone, and it's our belief that the logs were actually apes that were prone, that were laying there and pretending to be logs. So now we have a slogan like, first thing you do is shoot all the logs. And then, because you never know, and this is something that if you sort of study, quote unquote, the literature on this animal, that stopping and freezing and pretending to be a tree, not moving is something that has been observed time and again.
Yeah, I've investigated many reports like that.
And we've observed that as well. So it's absolutely behavior that they exhibit.
Also, Seth, we do not allow any sort of alcohol.
No.
That's it. Bottom line. Now, when we go to our retreat, our annual retreat, I mean, it's kind of like the military. When I was in the military, when we were on mission, man, it was all mission. There was no, you were game face on, and you were all business. When you got back to base, touchdown, you had your briefing, your debriefing. After that, man, it was party time. And that's the way we are. We're out in the field. It is all mission. I mean, we're all business. When we have our annual retreat, we let our hair down, and then we have a good time, and just and we do what we do at a great gathering, a social gathering. But when we're out there doing this, it's all business, every bit of it.
Okay, so we're heading into obviously the summertime, so you're going to be getting into X. What are the challenges you typically face when you're in there for the summer, and what do you foresee as being probably your biggest challenge this summer?
Well, going into this year's Operation Resolute, which is what we're calling it now, which by the way has begun. We have a team out there now, and they've already found a 14-inch track with toes. They've already had some interactions. Going into this, we were concerned about the weather, because that particular part of the country, Texas included, has just gotten an enormous amount of rainfall over the last 30 days, and we were concerned because the thing is, when you go there, you expect rain. That area gets anywhere of north of 70 inches of rain a year. It's a very special area, and it gets dumped on. So, we're thinking, okay, over 20 inches the last 30 days, that could present a problem, because you have to actually physically cross flowing creeks to get to these cabins. You have to drive through the water. And so if those things are flooded, that's going to create a problem. The roads can be pretty mushy when it rains. There are places where you drive along the road or trail, whatever you want to call it. It's not really a road. And it's right along a ridge that you look down out your window and you're just kind of looking down a mountain. And so there was concern that maybe parts of that could have washed out from all the rain. Happy to announce that the team has been in place now, and they've reported back and said that the roads are fine. that it just looks like it's rained a bunch, and that they had really no problems getting in there.
Creeks are high, but the roads are there. And the other issue that we've had in the past is trees down along the road from weather. It's stunning to me that we didn't have to clear any trees going in this year because of the storms. And there's a lot of these trees are sort of precariously sitting there next to the road anyway, and apparently none of them fell over. So that was the expectation going into this year, that the first team was going to have to deal with a lot of water and probably some down timber, and neither of those things happened.
It's just a logistic. You always have concerns about logistics. As the coordinator of all that sort of thing, those are always in the front of mind is, are we going to be able to get, because not everybody has a big 4x4 truck that they can just wheel down into the area. So, it's always a concern of whether or not we can coordinate everybody and get everybody down there and get everybody's equipment and gear down there, and then, keep the place supplied with the proper gear, batteries, everything that we need to keep an operation going for, 3 to 4 months. And there's a lot of logistics involved in that. And so those are always the concerns, And then you always have that concern about, it's a nightmare for us now when we think about it, but we always have the concern: are they going to be there? Are they still going to be there when we get there? Did they just up and leave? And I'm now sort of the opinion that it's the only thing that's going to force them out of that area is just some clear cutting, some serious logging of that area. If that happens, all bets are off.
Yeah. The other interesting sort of logistical issue to deal with is the fact that you've got teams of anywhere from 4 to 6 people on site for months at a time. You start to have issues of refuse collection and disposal.
Yeah.
There's no plumbing on site. There is an outhouse, but that has to be dealt with. So you start to, after the first several weeks, you start to have sort of the opposite problem of having to eliminate waste and eliminate trash and that sort of thing. So, and then of course we want to be good to the environment and to the land, the people who will let us go in there and stay there. So we have to maintain the property. It gets a lot of wear and tear, all those people coming through. We have to keep it cleaner than when we found it. We have to get rid of all of our trash and other things. So
make sure it stays stocked with firewood.
Yeah, because we will sometimes use the firewood depending on what the weather's doing. So it turns in that's sort of a unsung, so to speak, aspect of trying to put as many people as we put in place for as long as we do.
All right. So is this the year?
Every year is the year. I mean, when we
I
go
think
into
every year
it,
could be the year.
Absolutely, we go into it thinking. I mean, confidence is high. I got to tell you, Seth. I mean. There's no reason for us not to be confident, given what we've been through. What we now know. I mean, it could happen at any time, and I say that every time I'm on one of these shows. It literally can happen at any time. We've got people there, boots on the ground. They are eager. They're eager to get the job done, to do this, to get this thing listed, and I mean, their frame of mind is right. They're mentally prepared, they're physically prepared, they're logistically prepared. All that has to happen now is opportunity has to meet preparation. And when that happens, the world's going to be changed. Sounds simple, but in truth, if you pare everything down, that's really what it boils down to.
And if anyone who hunts, and I'm not a hunter, but now I know enough of them and appreciate enough of what this is like, and I don't know that I would necessarily describe what we do as hunting, because we're not trying to bag a game animal, but there is an element of that in what we do. This idea of opportunity and preparation coming together, and then there's a chance element. That's sort of the third thing. There's a roll of the dice. You can put yourself in a situation so that when you see the deer walk by, but then all kinds of things can happen that can get in the way of that. And any hunter who has hunted knows what I'm talking about. Just because you are in a spot and there's the deer doesn't mean you get to take that one home. That's right. You could miss it, or something else can happen, and or a twig could get in the way. So I think that. What's interesting to me about what we've done is that every year we try some stuff, we learn some stuff, and we adapt. Mm-hmm. And the tricky bit is that the animal that we're studying, that we're trying to establish here, isn't like a deer or a bear or something like that. It's also learning and adapting, and
very quickly.
As we talk about this, like these new tactics that we're going to try, we only get a few shots at those, before we realize that their behavior has changed. The things that we used to take for granted that they did all the time in the first year, they don't do as much because of the changes in our tactics as we go along. So you have this animal that you're dealing with that as Daryl says, is probably the smartest animal in North America other than human beings. And it's not just going to keep doing the exact same thing over and over again. And you can't do it either. You can't expect to do the same thing for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years in a row and expect that they're going to do the same thing back to you. It just doesn't work that way.
Okay. All right. So do you have one of you, either one, have something you consider like the prototypical, the best example of some sort of encounter inside Area X? What, if there's one situation, one scenario that to you kind of sums everything up?
No, yeah. I mean, but it's only because it happened to me. I can't.
Oh, that's a tough question. I mean, there are a number of observations, encounters that it just sort of would encapsulate the whole experience. I mean, that would just be so representative of what we've been through, and I guess the premier one that comes to my mind is the event that involved Travis and Alton in the tent, Travis in the Overwatch with Robert Taylor, Travis taking the shot. He sees the ape in the thermal scope, takes the shot, the round hits the tree, deflects, and the thing gets away. That pretty much sums up the entire 4 years.
Yeah.
That we are right on the brink. We are on the precipice of discovery, but so far they keep eluding us by a quarter of an inch.
And what's interesting to me about that particular scenario and why I think that is actually a pretty good representative encounter is because one of the last year I was in there with a guy who had not been there before. And we had, I'm trying to condense this so that it doesn't go on for a million years. We discovered not too far from where the cabin is, we had found sort of a spot in some foliage where, coming from the backside, I saw what clearly appeared to be a tunnel in the foliage where some kind of animal had gone in and out multiple times. You could see it. It was round, and it was about maybe 4 or 5 feet at its highest. And so you can imagine some animal getting in there and like hunkering into this little hidey hole. And if you were in there, because I crawled in, if you were in there, suddenly you were inside this foliage, and it kind of opened up inside, kind of like a little room, and you could see straight out right where we sat at night. You could see the fire, you could see our trucks, you could see the front porch of the cabin, you could see everything. So to me, having been in there enough times to know that they're often very, very close, I thought, well, there's apes in there. This is where they hang out. One of the places that they might hang out and look at us. So that was my, hypothesis because of experience and everything else. So I had come up with this idea that we were going to do that night, where we were going to try to sort of get around it. We were going to try to, I don't know the actual military term, but we were going to flank it. We were going to get behind it and see if we could spook it up or get some kind of activity. Not knowing, but suspecting that it would be in there. So I'm going through my plan and telling these guys what I want to do. And everyone in there was sort of a grizzled veteran, except this one guy who is a grizzled veteran, but not of X. And at one point he's like, "Why are we doing this? What are we doing this for?" I'm like, "Because there's an ape in there. I'm telling you, man, there's an ape in that bush, right? Right now, looking at us right this second, I can tell you for a fact," which of course I didn't know for a fact, but I had a really strong hunch. So we did the thing. And as they were coming up the side, and he was on the group that was sort of flanking on the animal, something really, really big got up and took off like a shot out of that bush.
Crossed the trail.
And crossed the trail right in front of them, but just before they got there. And then when they got there, they had this unbelievable sort of horse urine. Yeah. If you go to the gorilla house at the zoo, that's what it was, this pungent cloud. This thing had crossed milliseconds before they got in there, and he came back and his eyes were wide, and that was it. There was an ape in that bush, right? And that's the incident that Daryl's talking about with Travis. They sat in the that happened at very, very early in the morning. They had sat in Overwatch for hours. Nothing had happened. All of a sudden, I don't know, 15 feet away, Daryl, 20 feet away from where they were standing, an ape stands up. And he sees it on thermal. He sees the outline of the animal. He sees the conical head. He sees it going down to the wide shoulders. This thing is 8 feet tall. It stands up 20 feet from where he is, and it's been there undetected for hours. That is X. That's what happens in X, right there.
And then he takes the shot and it hits a tree limb and deflects the round. That's X.
So lucky apes.
Thus far.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna get into the lazy part of the show, which is that I threw up a post on the SasWhat Facebook page asking for questions. We got questions, so now I don't have to come up with any more questions. I can just ask you what people are posting, and the first question comes from Derek Patterson. He ask them if they were expecting better results from the DNA test they did from the creek bed. Degradation of the sample makes sense, but it's too bad they couldn't get anything from it.
Yeah, we were that. So that for anybody who doesn't know, in the first year of the operations that we've been doing, what we call the echo incident, an animal was seen by Daryl. A shot was taken by Daryl. We believe we hit the animal, and then a week later we found blood in the creek bed on some rocks that we believe came from the ape, but it had been exposed to the sun for an entire week. That's sort of the backstory to that. And yeah, I would say we certainly hoped. I think what bothers me more than the fact that there were no results from that sample is the way that the sample was treated by the lab and the people we've sent it to. I mean, it was ridiculed. It was dismissed. It was not taken seriously because we said what we thought it was, and you can't do that, I guess.
Yeah, we were pretty stunned when we got the results back.
He said it wasn't even blood. I mean, he said it wasn't even blood, which is ridiculous. It absolutely 100% was blood. We used a very common. Again, we've got trauma surgeons in the group. We have law enforcement in the group. We know how to determine if something is blood. That was blood. Absolutely beyond doubt blood. And this guy, this DNA expert said, we didn't even see any blood on that rock. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, see,
we're not children.
Yeah, right. We collected 5 rocks, I think. We collected 5. We used one of the rocks to confirm that the substance was blood. Can't use that rock anymore. So then we sent two rocks to the lab.
Yeah.
The lab could not confirm that there was even blood on the 2 rocks we sent. We still have 2 rocks. In our possession, and we're just waiting. We're waiting for technology, which technology.
I mean, one of our members is an expert in DNA, the technology behind DNA analysis, the science behind DNA analysis, and so we're not starting from zero when it comes to that sort of thing, and we believe that at some point technology will catch up with our sample, and that's what we're waiting for. It is being stored in proper conditions because this person is in our group, knows how to store this sort of thing. So someday. We're hoping that technology catches up with our sample, but for right now, it's useless.
I'm absolutely positive I hit it. I have no doubt. It was 30 feet away from me. I was using a shotgun. I'd been in a skeet shooting competition 2 weeks before, and I did very well in that. And this thing was a huge. I mean, it was not some little skeet, little clay pigeon. This was a big 7-foot tall, big thing walking through the woods. I mean, I know I hit it. At least with the first shot. After that, I don't remember seeing it after the first shot. But I'm positive I hit it. Positive. All
right. Anonymous question. Once a specimen is taken, has there been any thoughts on the emotional and psychological aftermath of taking a specimen on the successful collector and the group at large? Specimen collection is such a volatile subject. Can you plan for what would happen next?
Well, for us, it's not a volatile subject. For us, it's straightforward, it's scientific, it's the way that it must go, it's something that must take place. Speaking for me personally, if I shoot one, I'm not going to suffer any sort of emotional trauma over it. I know that it's something that has to be done. And we're not going to release the name of the shooter. I can tell you that right now. That person's going to remain anonymous. I think that most of us in the organization, those of us who are attempting to collect a specimen, I think that we've long ago made that crossover, and we've definitely made up our minds that it's the right thing to do. It's ethical, it's right, it's ethical, it's moral, it's the right thing to do for the protection of the species, for the discovery of the species, for the protection of its habitat. It's the right thing to do, and so there's no emotional baggage there with that for me, and I don't think there is for most of the people in the organization.
I think the critical thing that Daryl pointed out is that not everyone in the group is there trying to collect the specimen. Not everyone in the group on site is a shooter.
Right.
The people who have signed up for that, who are attempting to do that, have already weighed these things in their mind. Now, of course, no one knows. No one in the group has done this before, so I'm not going to say we know for an absolute fact what's going to happen after the fact. And every different individual is an individual and different. But the people who are trying to do it have weighed this, have pondered it, and to Daryl's point, I mean, once you accept the inevitability of what needs to happen to prove this animal being real, and once you accept the good that comes from that, then the rest of it becomes easier. The rest of it becomes less of a challenge. And I don't think that anyone in the group relishes the notion of having to take the life of any animal, but the reality is that we know it has to happen. So
it has to be done. It just has to be done.
Right.
Let me qualify what I just said. I think there could be some emotional, some emotion that stems from it, but I think it would be, the emotion would stem from just, oh my God, I've just done something that's going to change the world. I think the emotion is going to derive from knowing that you've just done something that is going to be enormous in the entire scheme of natural history. Now that is weighty,
And accomplish something you've attempted to do for years, with hundreds of hours of preparation, thousands of hours of actual action, and finally having found yourself.
Despite great odds.
At the end, successful conclusion of that endeavor. That's going to be emotional for everyone. But I don't believe that are the kind that the person who asked the question was thinking of.
All right. Jean St. Jean asked, do they find the enigmatic stick structures there? Those always seem like wishful nonsense to me. Also, if they hear the whistles and whoops the Native Americans associated with the Nawac creatures.
I've heard whistles. I've heard whoops.
We've heard those.
I've personally not seen a stick structure that I would ascribe to a wood ape, but I've heard whistles, and in the middle. It's weird when you're sitting in the pitch black in the middle of the night and you hear a whistle from the woods. That is clearly a whistle, not a bird. That's kind of a freaky experience.
Yeah. Travis and I were tracked 2 years ago.
That's right.
During the off season, we were tracked by a whistler that I responded to its whistling, and then it would respond to mine. And this went on for over a mile and a half, 2 mile stretch. And so yeah, we definitely heard the whistle. We've documented that. That's in our paper that we released. We talked about that. The whoops. Brian and I actually heard whoops first time together. We were there in 2008. Yeah, and Brian said, that sounds like and I said, whoop. He said, yeah.
There was just one whoop. Like, whoop.
I finished the sentence for him. Yeah. So yeah, we've heard those. But the stick structures, we're in the middle of the woods, and to me it's impossible, really virtually impossible to.
We never found anything that was obviously something that was put together like that. You see, there's trees everywhere, there's sticks everywhere, there's branches coming down everywhere, but we've never seen anything that looks like somebody with some forethought and intention built something. We've never seen that. No.
I've seen what I thought was a nest when I had my first visual encounter in 2004, and the only reason I attributed it to this animal was because I just saw the animal. It just it fled from this. And it looked like some sort of nest or something, a very primitive structure. So in that case, I do think a wood ape built this, constructed this, and then it fled. And the only reason I think that is because I saw it flee that area. So, but other than that, no, I don't think any of us, I don't think we have in any of our documented field reports, any reports of stick structures that we attributed to wood apes.
TPs or X's and that kind of stuff.
No.
An X would be fitting in Area X, but I don't think.
Good question. Good question.
And it makes me think of these. Here in Ohio, there's a research area that I know a couple groups spend a lot of time in, and one of the big things they found there that does seem very curious is these trees that are kind of bent over at about 15 to 20 feet up, and they're intertwined into almost
that's a little different than, I don't really classify it as a strict stick structure, but the known great apes are known to manipulate vegetation for whatever reason. So it's not beyond the realm of belief or possibility that these things would do something similar. Now, I have seen some twisted branches, twisted trees. I think possibly were done by wood apes.
That's the hallmark I look for, because a tree can break for lots of different reasons, but we found trees that have been broken over and then appear to have been twisted as that's happened. So you see the bark is sort of right. So you get sort of a wrapping thing, which I suppose could be completely innocent and natural, but it appears as though something twisted as it brought that tree down. And I agree with Daryl. I don't know that I would consider those stick structures. Those are just interesting tree breaks.
But one has to be careful about those because black bears are known to manipulate vegetation as well. Black bears will break tree branches. They'll break small saplings. So you just need to be careful about those.
Yeah.
We have a question from Andrew Firth. Have they ever considered letting a filmmaker into Area X to document what they're doing there?
We've been asked. We've been asked a number of times.
Seth, we should talk off air.
Yeah. I almost read the rest of that, but it mentions this movie that I made, and I made a promise to stop mentioning the movie on my show. So,
I would love to talk about X. I don't know if you want to talk about this because you don't want to talk about the movie anymore, but the X parallels to what is documented in that nameless film are very interesting to me.
It is odd. The stone stuff, especially the rock throwing.
Well, but it's, I mean, if we're talking about a species, at least in my mind, that exists. It has certain behavioral characteristics. It makes perfect sense that what it does in Area X, it will do elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And so, you just happen to have this house, this structure that is situated at the base of a mountain, very much like our cabin in Area X. What we've seen in Area X is they like the high ground. They like to go to 30, 40, 50 feet up the slope, and from that position, cast rocks down onto the cabin. It's not a new story. It's something that's been talked about before. You have the so-called event in Ape Canyon, which involves something very similar. The American Indians, Native Americans, they reported the same thing. The whistles, after dark, and the rocks would begin, to be thrown at them. So it's not a new phenomenon. And the only reason I say that is because you said it's kind of odd, and I understand that perspective. But I don't think it's odd at all. I think it's what we would expect. Where these things are, that's what they're going to do. If there's a permanent dwelling of humans, they're going to throw rocks. That's what they do. Because it's either a form of play or they want you out of their territory. We're not sure.
Yeah, it's repeated behavior patterns. That's the thing that I'm looking for as a non-believer, which I've stated before. I'm a non-believer. As someone, I am looking for those repeated behavior patterns because to me that is a form of evidence.
You're a non-believer. How long have you been an associate member? One trip down. That'll get wiped clean once he takes one trip in the area.
I would love to take him to area.
I believe you.
You can call yourself whatever you want, Seth.
Don't
feel bullied. You're fine.
He'll look back and say, that was the old Seth. I don't know that person anymore.
Yeah, well, it'll be fun for the listeners to watch the transformation. Rob Hostetter, kind of on the same, piggybacking on that, would you consider inviting Les Stroud to Area X to do a show?
Here's no, and so there's a difference. I personally, of course, it's not my decision at all because we're an organization and we do things according to a certain set of rules. But personally, the difference between having a documentarian come down to document what we do is very different than having Les Stroud, who I have a world of respect for as a person. We have absolutely zero interest to produce a TV show in Area X. That is clearly off the table, never going to happen, and I can say that with pretty conclusively that is never going to happen. It's not what we're doing. I even though I love Les as an individual, we're not there to sell commercial time for anyone, and that's what TV shows are for. And so no, that's never going to happen. Even though I think Les is, I think he's great, it's never going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think almost universally within our organization, Les Stroud is loved.
Oh,
He's the real deal. I mean, I went through Air Force SEER training, and I know Les Stroud is he's a real survivalist. There's no doubt about it.
Now, if Les wants to come down and just hang out, he's got an open invitation.
There you go.
Not if he's bringing his TV cameras. No.
There you go. There's another layer, though, of approval that we have to go through, and that's the landowner. And so we can't presume to just be able to invite some celebrity down to film his TV show, which we don't want to do anyway. But we would have to get approval from the landowner, and that's not going to happen either because we know his sentiments. So, it's just not going to happen. We're not after that.
All right, I have the most specific question I've ever seen from Lindsay on the site. Let me get through this. In late October to November, do you notice them out between 8:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. or on north-facing hillsides during 12:30 to 2:45? If you ever notice them stocking a bedding area or feeding area for other animals, do you find they use the north-facing side of a hill to approach that bedding site if there's one there on the north-facing side of a hill? I'm not 100% sure if I read that right, but
what's the questioner's name again?
Lindsay.
Lindsay, we've seen them in a variety of environments and settings and times, and it would be impossible to nail down any specific favored time period in which we encounter them, or any specific grounds that they seem to favor.
The level of specificity in the question is just not one that we've got data that can answer.
Appreciate the question, but yeah, absolutely.
All right, Kevin Williams, can you have Brian tell the story of when they were in the cabin at night and the whole cabin shook when something hit it?
Well, that was going to be my encapsulating all the things that happened in X, because there were little bits of so many things that happened that night, and it's an incredibly long story, and I would encourage anyone who wants to hear it to listen to the episode of the Bigfoot Show. I don't remember which one it is off the top of my head.
You're talking about the one that you heard that came up on the porch and shook and stepped up on the porch?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about that night is that there was a lot of activity around us, a little tiny backstory to that, and I know, Seth, you don't like your shows that go long, so I'll try to keep this short. So we had cameras up around the cabin. We had moved the cameras up on the hillside because we had detected activity up there, and then that night when all the cameras were gone, take this for what you will, the activity around the cabin increased quite a bit to the extent that we had potentially a sighting through a night vision scope, not a thermal unit, but night vision. It was very, very dark that night. There was no moon. And then we had an animal very close to us jump out of a tree and run away on 2 feet. And then I know it was on 2 feet because I heard it run away. And then we had some rocks thrown at us from very close quarters in pretty much all directions. So we had retreated into the cabin. It was like 4:30 in the morning at this point. It was very, very late at night. And I was the last person to fall asleep because as I was laying there, several things happened. We had a rock. What is clearly a rock hit the roof of the cabin. It's a metal roof of the cabin. There's a difference between how rocks sound and nuts sound, and this was a rock. Sort of hit the roof, and nobody did anything. Nobody got up. Most everyone had gone to sleep except for myself and a member.
Plus, you just hear so many rocks.
Right, you hear like, but that was a very quiet night, and this rock hits, and nobody does anything, and I just so we lay there. And then I was the only person awake at this point. Nuts started to hit the back of the cabin, which is something that happened to Daryl the first time he went in there. And what I perceive in retrospect, this was probing. This was, I'm going to throw a rock at the cabin. Nothing happened. It got a little closer and started throwing nuts against the back wall of the cabin. There's an overhang there on the roof, so I don't know. And there was no wind that night. I have no idea how a nut would otherwise hit the back of the cabin if it wasn't thrown by someone or something.
There's no way it can.
But there were these little nuts, these little husks from the what kind of nut tree is that over the cabin?
Well, there's black walnut and hickory trees.
Yeah, I think it was a hickory. The husk.
The hickory tree is right there where you're talking about. It's a hickory tree.
So I think it was taking the little hickory nuts or husks and pinging them against the back. Then I heard something like sort of slap, like flat bare feet slapping over bare ground, like thump 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 over. I heard it like sort of running by the corner of the cabin. And so every time I hear something, it's getting a little closer, a little closer, a little closer. This is all happening over the course of like 10 or 15 minutes. And then I hear something like this weird plinking sound, like something, and I figured out what it was after the fact, but like something was like rapping on some sort of piece of metal. And I remember saying to myself, and this is what I say on the Bigfoot show, so if you've heard this is a repeat, but I remember saying to myself quite clearly, and it was pitch black. I'm telling you, I could not see my hand before my face. There was no light. I'm saying to myself, and I'm on this bunk, a little more set up. I'm on the top bunk. There's a Boggy Creek window sort of down by my feet. And I say to myself, what is it going to take for you to do something, to get up, to say something, to, in some way react to the fact that something is running around outside the corner of this cabin, outside the window of this cabin. And I said to myself, I don't know, but when it happens, I'll know what it is. And as soon as I said that to myself, the moment that thought came into my head, the entire cabin shifted, the whole thing moved, and what we were able to figure out after the fact is that there was a porch off the side of the cabin there, and something stepped up on that porch, and as it did so, it was big enough and heavy enough, and my good friend Mark McClurkin, who is a big boy, was not quite big enough to make the cabin move as it
Mark
did.
is 6'1" and weighs about 280 pounds.
And he maybe half as much. And so this whole structure shifted. And it wasn't a violent action. It wasn't as Daryl has described, who had the cabin slapped or struck before. It wasn't like that. It was like something was coming up on the porch to that little window. And that was just it. I mean, that was like, for me, that was like the meter was all the way on F, full, done, baked. I got out of bed. I'm like, that's it. And
the Parker factor meter. That's what it was.
Like, a turkey, the little red button had popped out on me. I was done at that point. Like, and the funny thing is, you go into X and like you want ape action, you want to experience things. But at that night, I was like, enough. Will you just get away from me so I can get 2 hours of sleep? You stupid monkeys.
I mean,
I know they're not monkeys.
Be careful what you wish for. People, begging to go into X. Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
That's
that story.
Great story. One of my favorites.
It is.
Actually.
It is a great story. And Seth, it really, truly happened.
Yeah. No, I believe it.
I promise you. It's funny. I don't remember if I've said this on your show or where I've said this. I remember saying it recently. Somebody made a comment on the Facebook page of the Bigfoot Show after I said that, and they said that when they heard me tell that story, that's when they listened. They heard me become a quote-unquote believer, right? They could hear it in my voice. And it was... That whole week was just so...
That was
incredible. That's a turning point, literally a turning point in my life.
I could hear Brian's voice every day when he would call to report in. Every day his voice became a little more agitated.
Well, and the culminated in the event with Mark in the creek and the shot fired and the thing charging him and him making the weird clucking noise that apparently you can't say to a male wood ape if he's got girls around. And it was just a super stressful and incredible experience. And truthfully, it left me. I'm not going to say that I know what PTSD is, but I can tell you that for weeks after, laying in my bed,
PTSD.
In my bed, in my house in suburban Minneapolis, I would hear a sound outside and immediately be awake and immediately have my brain ticking and thinking what made that sound. And I had to tell myself, like, knock it off. You're at home. There's nothing out there. It's probably a cat, right? But there was absolutely sort of an after effect to having that experience. That whole week, culmination of that whole week was impactful.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very low level of PTSD. There's no doubt about it. You endured something very traumatic, stressful.
I'll tell you, it's gone now.
You had to deal with it for a week.
The shit I do now is compared to then. I mean, it isn't. I don't remember if we talked about this on your show or not, but this whole fearlessness factor or the role of fear and all this. I think it helped because now I do crazy stuff, the kind of stuff that Daryl does on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, that's got to happen. Is that a typical response of like newbies that come into Area X like that?
Yeah,
pretty much.
Absolutely. If you have an eventful week like that, absolutely.
Think about it, Seth. I mean, just take you for instance. You're a non-believer. You go in there. You're there for 2 days, and there are rocks being thrown at the top of the cabin, hitting the cabin. You see these rocks, And you've already made the evaluation in your mind that there's no way people can be doing it because you've walked up that mountain and it's been extremely taxing on you.
Right.
So you've already made this sort of logical determination. Okay, this can't be people. So there's something up here on this mountain throwing rocks at us. Okay, so that's troubling. That rocks your world a little bit because you're already a person who doesn't think these things exist. So then you turn in at night to go to bed, and then the side of the cabin gets hit. Boom, in the middle of the night, and it gets pummeled with rocks throughout the night. You get up the next day, you and two of your buddies are hiking up the mountain, and you see this big brown thing that's 6 or 7 feet tall run from tree to tree, and now you're freaked out. Your whole world has been rocked. They exist now.
And the crazy thing is, I mean, what everything Daryl is saying is absolutely true. But I went in there that week, and I was way north of 90% suspecting that these things were real, and every day something happened in that week.
That's
to just
still a wide gap, though, man.
It is, and
from 95 to 100% is still a wide gap.
And the rock thing that Daryl's talking about, you are sitting there, and it isn't like something that hits you in the face. It's something that you're sitting there like pondering, like, there's rocks flying out of the trees right now. There are rocks flying at me. I can see. There's a rock. I just saw that rock fly out of the bushes. Something just was up in that tree and jumped down. I mean, again, there's a good example of that night that the thing came up on the porch, and I said that with my night vision, I thought I saw an outline of an animal at the end of this clearing, and I didn't do anything about it. I didn't go down there. This past the last time I was in there with Daryl, I saw an animal peeking from behind a tree. I saw it like put its head back behind a tree, and the first thing I wanted to do was go over there. And so the reaction is completely the opposite. Then I was like, that looks like a really big animal. Now I'm like, oh, there you are, and I'm like, and so you find yourself like running towards them, and I don't know when that happened because at one point I was going back to the campfire for security, and now I'm running at them. I don't know when that happened, but it did.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to wrap up on this question. So when I was making the film that I just made, I did gain this weird attachment to the property where we did a lot of our filming and where the original incidents happened back in '78 and all that stuff. And that was just from being out there a handful of times where I was aware of this history of activity and everything seemed very mysterious to me. But I loved going back there, and I still do. And if I can, I'm always watching the woods. And if I go up in the woods, I'm watching the hills. To both of you, each of you can answer this question. What is Area X to you when you go back there? What is the attachment you have to it? What do you feel when you're there? What do you feel when you're not there?
When I get up in the morning, the first thing I do when I get up in the morning is I go and I get a glass of water, and I hydrate, and then I come here into my study, and then my study is my abode, and I turn on some music. It's classical music. And then I find pictures of the Ouachita Mountains, and I put them up on my computer, and I meditate. So that's what that place means to me. It means it's a magical place to me. It's and it's really difficult to put into words, but it's a place I go to in my mind all the time because it's really hard to explain, but I'm in my element there. I mean, if I had my choice, man, I wouldn't mind being buried on that mountain. I mean, it's just an incredible place, and observed so many things that so many people just think is comic book stuff, but it's real. It happened to me, and so it's the closest I can get to heaven on this planet. Seriously, I mean, it's undeveloped, it's beautiful, it's rugged, it's remote, it's wild. All the things that I love, and it still exists, even in 21st century America.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard place, but it's a place you can go and have things happen to you that you're told by most people are impossible. And, my thinking about it is a little different than Daryl's. I don't think about it when I get up, but I often think about it as I'm falling asleep, and I'm often putting myself back in that place, and it isn't, sometimes I think of nature as sort of a calming a place to go, a place to sort of reconnect with what it is to be a a creature on this planet, and that to me isn't necessarily X, but it certainly happens there. I don't think of X as a calming place. I don't feel calm there, but I feel I feel alive when I'm there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as I said, if you're fortunate enough to be there at the right time, something impossible will happen, and it's hard to get that out of your head. It's hard to not think about that on a regular basis.
Absolutely. And Seth, it's just like, we're just bursting with this stuff, man. It's so it's so difficult because you just want to share it with everybody. You want to tell everybody what's happened to you. You want to share it with the world, but the world just doesn't. They don't care. They think
which we do, and then you've got individuals mostly on the internet who talk about how we're somehow saying these things and putting out podcasts and writing research papers for the attention. Like, no, I just want everyone to know. I just want everyone to know.
Man,
I want everyone to know what happens there. It's incredible stuff. And what I have zero profit. I have not profited personally in any way from doing this. No one has.
Of dollars. Tens of thousands, each of us.
I don't know what it would be like to be the kind of person to have the experiences we've had there, and then to just like go home and turn on the TV and watch the news and not tell anyone that. It blows me away. I don't know how you could do that. So I'm totally with Daryl on that one. We get out and it's like you just want people to know, like, this place exists, this stuff happens. You know what? Wherever you live, wherever you are, if you're close to the wilderness, chances are there's one of these places near you too. Go find it, because they're out there. I do not believe for a second that X is the only place like X in North America. I don't believe it at all. There's other X's out there.
Has to be, this can't be the only pocket of these things in North America.
No.
They're out there. It's just people are going to have to, you're going to have to get past the weekend thing and dig in and really go after it.
All right, I'm wrapping up on that line about X. Get out there and find it. That's a great line.
I'm trying to help